Here is something that surprises almost every foreigner. You do not need to be a resident of Japan to buy a house here. You do not need a visa. You do not need permanent residency, a Japanese passport, a local job, or any government approval. A tourist who flew in last week has the same legal right to buy a Japanese house as a citizen born here. So if buying is not the hard part, what is? The answer is the process, the steps, the paperwork, the costs that never show up on the price tag, and a brand new rule arriving in 2026 that every foreign buyer needs to know about. This is the complete, start-to-finish guide to buying an Akiya, one of Japan's cheap empty houses, as a foreigner. By the end, you will know exactly where to find one, the 8 steps to actually own it, what it truly costs to close, and the traps that catch people who only ever saw the headline price. Start with the law, because the myths here run deep. Japan places no restriction on foreign property ownership. No minimum price, no special permission, no limit on the type or location of what you buy, and, crucially, no foreign buyer surcharge. You pay the exact same taxes a Japanese citizen pays. You can own the land and the building outright, freehold, with no expiry. There is just one thing that buying a house does not do. It does not give you a visa. Owning property and having the right to live in Japan are two completely separate systems. You can own a home in Kagoshima and still only be allowed to stay 90 days as a tourist. So treat the purchase as exactly what it is, acquiring an asset, and keep your visa plans on a separate track. With that cleared up, the real question turns practical. How do you actually find one of these cheap houses? Most of Japan's cheap empty houses are not on the glossy listing portals. They live on what are called Akiya banks, public, municipal databases where local governments post vacant homes, often far below market price, and sometimes outside the normal real estate channels entirely. Almost every town across Kyushu, from Fukuoka in the north down to Kagoshima in the south, runs one, and Japan's land ministry now aggregates many of them into a single nationwide search. There are 2 catches. Most listings are in Japanese, so you will lean on a translation tool. And some carry conditions. A few towns only want a buyer who will actually live there, not a weekend owner, because the whole purpose of an Akiya bank is to bring a fading community back to life. Beyond the banks, private aggregator sites translate listings for overseas buyers, and ordinary local agents quietly hold cheap older stock the big portals ignore. Whichever route you take, one rule never bends. Do not buy on photos alone. A professional inspection runs roughly 50 to 70,000 yen for a basic check, and over 100,000 for a detailed one, a few $100s in total. It is the cheapest insurance you will ever buy against a rotten roof or a cracked foundation. Once you have found a house, the path to owning it runs about 8 steps, and usually 60 to 90 days. 1. You submit an expression of interest or a direct offer through the agent or the municipality. 2. You negotiate the price and the terms. 3. And this step is unique to Japan. A licensed agent reads you the explanation of important matters, a legally required document covering the property's boundaries, zoning, rights, and known defects. 4. You sign the purchase contract and pay a deposit, typically around 10%. 5. You prepare your documents, and here a buyer from overseas cannot simply use a Japanese seal. So you obtain an affidavit that notarizes your signature and address, usually at your embassy or consulate. 6. You appoint 2 professionals, a judicial scrivener, the shahashishi, who handles the legal transfer of title, and, if you live abroad, a tax representative inside Japan to receive your tax bills so that nothing gets lost. 7. Final settlement, where you pay the balance and the scrivener registers the property in your name at the Legal Affairs Bureau. 8. You receive the title, and the house is legally, fully yours. Now the part the sticker price hides. On top of the purchase, budget for transaction costs of roughly 6 to 10% of the price. Break it down. The agent's commission is about 3% plus consumption tax. The registration and license tax is around 2% of assessed value. The real estate acquisition tax is roughly 3 to 4%. Then there is stamp duty and the judicial scrivener's fee, which runs about 100 to 300,000 yen, call it $600 to $2,000. Add the inspection on top. So a house advertised at $20,000 realistically costs you a few thousand more just to close. And the costs do not end at purchase. You will owe annual fixed asset tax even while the house sits empty, which is exactly why so many of these homes were abandoned in the first place, because simply holding them quietly drains money. None of this makes a cheap Akiya a bad deal. It just means the real budget is the price, plus about 10% to close, plus whatever the building itself needs, and that renovation, not the purchase, is usually where the serious money goes. Two things changed recently that every foreign buyer needs on their radar. First, at registration you now declare your citizenship and file a short report on how the property will be used within about 20 days. And second, the big one. From April 2026, any non-resident buyer must file a notification, known as Form 22, with the Bank of Japan within 20 days of the purchase, reporting the property's type, location, size, date, and price. It sounds intimidating, but in practice your judicial scrivener or agent can file it for you. It is a reporting requirement, not a barrier, and it does not stop you from buying. The genuine catch for non-residents is not paperwork, it is financing. Japanese banks are deeply reluctant to lend to buyers without residency or local income, and on an old house whose building value is already zero, they often will not lend at all. That is why the overwhelming majority of cheap Akiya are bought in cash. If you need a mortgage to make the numbers work, an old rural house is the single hardest case in the entire market. So, can a foreigner buy a cheap house in Japan? Absolutely. Legally, it is almost frictionless. The honest filter is not whether you can, but whether you should. This works beautifully for someone who can pay cash for a modest property, who looks at the building's condition and renovation budget with clear eyes, and who genuinely wants a foothold in Japan, whether that is a future home, a slow rural project, or simply a base for the weeks you can spend here each year. It works badly for anyone expecting a financed, hands-off investment that resells for a quick profit. Kyushu in particular is one of the best places to begin, mild in the south, far cheaper than Tokyo, dense with Akiya banks, and unusually welcoming to newcomers. And remember the one fact that started all of this. There is no nationality requirement standing between you and that front door. If this made Japan's empty house market a little clearer, subscribe to Akiya Handbook, the channel that explains how Japan's cheap houses actually work, honestly, and without selling you anything. There is also a free guide waiting in the description, the Akiya Buyer's Starter Guide, How to Buy a Cheap House in Japan Without Getting Burned. 11 chapters on the truth about so-called free houses, the hidden costs, and who should not buy. No hype, and completely free. The link is below. Thanks for watching.